I think that there are some good provisions in this part of the bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Louisa Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been interesting reading Part 3 of the piece of legislation because I think it is part of this bill that we can support, because what it will do is compensate people who, through public works, have their homes taken from them. And I found an interesting piece of research titled "Solatium Payments for Public Works in International Comparison" by Mike Todd and John McDough, Property Group, Lincoln University. So their definition of solatium is compensation awarded for injury to the feelings as distinct from physical suffering and pecuniary loss, and it's derived from the concept of solace, which is defined as something that gives comfort or consolidation in misery, disappointment or distress. So I think it's great that we are actually addressing a piece of legislation that hasn't updated the compensation amount since 1975. The original compensation amount, just for everyone's interest, was an amendment to the Public Works Act of 1928 and 1970, and it was set at $500. And the interesting thing about that, when you look at the average price of the house at that time, which was $12,000 if you lived in Auckland, so essentially it was 4.2%. And the reason I bring up that percentage is because the next change happened in 1974, and it went to 2,000, and at that time houses were valued at 25,000, so essentially it became 8% compensation. And when I've looked at the piece of research I've just quoted earlier, it seems that internationally, jurisdictions either in providing this solatium payment or a premium on the market value of properties either do it by virtue of a market value or they set an amount. So in New Zealand, we've had this amount, $2,000 since 1975. Australia, their federal or Commonwealth Parliament sets it at $10,000. But if you look at the states, it's actually 10% of the market value. And so that's how they determine it. So depending on what the value of the property that the government takes through public works, their premium is then 10%. And that's so for Western Australia, for Victoria, ACT, New South Wales are pretty much like the Commonwealth. They set an amount which is $15,000. When you go to Canada, jurisdiction's really interesting. Federal government don't compensate or provide this premium, but British Columbia, Manitoba, Alberta provide 5% of market value. The UK is 10%. And the most interesting jurisdiction is India, who provide a 30% premium, which I find really interesting. So I guess from my perspective, when I look at how we've set it, the average value of a property in New Zealand, based on figures I obtained from December 2016, was $515,000. So when I look at the actual compensation package that is contained in this legislation, it seems we're averaging about 10%, which I find quite interesting. So everyone will get $35,000, and then based on your negotiation within 6 months of the government approaching you, we will give landowners another $10,000 and possibly another $5,000, depending on their circumstances. So if the average property in New Zealand is $550,000, they're going to get $50,000 compensation or premium, then it kind of averages out at 10%. So I'm just wondering, the Minister will be able to explain whether that was deliberate, because some of the contributions from my colleagues earlier seemed that the Order in Council might not be the appropriate way to do it. So maybe just benchmarking it at 10%, although I guess it depends on the value of the properties that you'll end up taking, might be a better way forward. But in saying that, I think what the Order in Council will do is provide the opportunity to update the amount as opposed to it being set at a particular amount that obviously, when we look back, 1975 to today, $2,000 is an inappropriate compensation. So I do want to say absolutely support the intention of this part of the legislation, but I am now curious about how we came up with those figures, whether we looked at just making it a percentage. And I know the percentage would be difficult if we look at April 2017 value of a property in Auckland, because it's nearly $1 million. So obviously compensating 10% of $1 million increases the liability for the government. So if the Minister wants to elucidate, I'd really appreciate it, because I've found it really fascinating looking at this research. Thank you.
The Honourable David Parker.
Just continuing